Neil Wrighton is the co-owner, production manager of Legacy Hemp, LLC, out of, I think it's McVille, North Dakota. Did I get that correct? All right, thanks, Neil. And then Dennis Clockingay, get that right? There's a long A on the end there. He's a crop management consultant and certified crop advisor with Profit Pro Ag out of Albert Lea, Minnesota. So welcome our panel of experts today, and hope you enjoyed tonight's seminar. So with that, I think we will welcome Jim Holte, Wisconsin Farm Bureau Federation President, to welcome everyone.
Thank you, Jerry. Well, I'm really pleased that I have the opportunity to welcome you all here this evening. I think it's apparent that in agriculture throughout the state, we have a number of challenges with creating a profit, whether you're in milk or meat or grains. Hemp is a potential industry that could play a role in our future. And while we have a lot more questions than answers as we come this evening, I think this is the perfect setting. We have a great set of people here to answer your questions, and it's my hope that when we all leave tonight, we'll have a better understanding of what the potential might be and how Wisconsin can move forward. So, again, thanks to the Technical College here at Triple Valley Tech for allowing us to use their facility tonight, and for Wisconsin Eye to be here to live stream it as well and archive it, and for each of our panelists. So thank you very much, and hope we have a good evening.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So our first speaker tonight will be Rob Richard. Again, he's the Senior Director of Government Relations with the Wisconsin Farm Bureau Federation, and he's going to kind of explain the legislative process on the bill and what the law is kind of shaping up to look like. So, Rob.
Thank you, Jerry. So, you all have seen the agenda, but just really give you a quick synopsis of what we're looking to do tonight. This is for you. This is to educate you on what we've been doing as far as getting the hemp industry growing in Wisconsin, and bringing together a panel of experts that really know the issue and should be able to answer a lot of the questions that might be presented here tonight. My marks, I'm going to try to make them as brief as possible because I want the focus to be on what Brian Kuhn from DATCAS is going to be talking about in terms of explaining the hemp pilot program and what these panel of experts have to say. So the question is, are we going to see a resurgence of Wisconsin hemp? And, you know, I personally believe, I think we will. I think there's a lot of excitement for it. It's just a matter of putting the right pieces in place. And I think what we've done with legislation is going to definitely guide us in that right direction. So we are all here because we had Governor Walker sign Wisconsin Act 100 into law on November 30th of last year. It was a bill introduced by Representative Jesse Kramer from Kewaskum and State Senator Patrick Teston from Stevens Point. They spent a good part of a year trying to get this bill through the legislature, really actively working on it for about 7 months for the most part. But we really had a surge in October of last year, in November, to move this thing through committee and eventually get it to the governor for his signature. I'm happy to say that things go right. We should have hemp seed in the ground, legal hemp seed in the ground for the first time in Wisconsin since 1957. So when I do presentations like this, I like to add a little bit of humor to the hemp discussion. So before I tell you what hemp is, I want to tell you what hemp is not. I've used this before. It's just a quick illustration of where the discussion usually starts, but usually 5 minutes into the discussion, we're way beyond this. But this is what hemp is not, okay? There is a complete separation from marijuana. So as long as we can start here and understand this, we're in pretty good shape. So what is hemp? So hemp and marijuana are from the same plant genus, cannabis. But from there, they really distinctively branch off. For instance, you have the genus Canis with dogs or wolves. So they're from the same genus: wolves, jackals, dogs, coyotes. But they're distinctively different. Same thing with cauliflower, broccoli, kale. They all come from the same genus, but they're distinctively different. That's the same thing with cannabis, with a distinction between hemp and marijuana. So as most of you already probably know, cannabis is high in THC. That creates that psychotropic effect, and low in CBD. Hence you got marijuana. Cannabis low in THC but high in the CBD. That's going to be industrial hemp. And CBD is actually a counteragent to THC, so it can really negate that high that you get from THC. Not that I would know from personal experience, but that's what I've been told. So around the world, about 30 countries, industrialized countries, produce hemp. They can legally grow it as a crop right now. As a country, we import about $600 million worth of hemp product into this country, most of it coming from Canada and China. What's it used for? It can be used for oils, industrial use, and cosmetic, putting in creams, shampoos, things of that nature, food and beverages, construction, building, installation, the boards. Some of you probably have heard of hempcrete. Textiles, whether that's clothing, paper, rope, things of that nature. And then high tech. This is where it's exciting, where these emerging markets are going to occur, not only in Wisconsin but around the country as we move forward with hemp. But supercapacitor batteries, automobiles, the interior panels, the exterior panels now. It's being used as a replacement for fiberglass. So just things like that. It's kind of exciting to see what those emerging markets will bear. So no country uses more hemp than the U.S., but we legally cannot grow it as a crop. So that's what kind of the whole hemp pilot programs are about. They allow us to grow it, but it's under a regulatory framework because it's still technically a Schedule I narcotic. Just a real brief history. It was grown prominently in colonial United States. It was legal tender. There were some colonies where you were forced to grow hemp. It was that important to the survival of those colonies. Presidents Washington, Adams, Jefferson, they all grew it and actively promoted it. The first copies of the Declaration of Independence were printed on hemp. Wisconsin really got active in the hemp industry around World War I because Russia was a major supplier of hemp around the world. When you have a war, supply lines get cut off. That's what happened here. So then there was an opportunity for states like Wisconsin to experiment with hemp and actively start growing it. The Marijuana Act of 1937 was the first regulatory bill or framework that really kind of stifled hemp production. This is where Congress basically declared that marijuana and hemp were almost the same thing, but they still recognized how important hemp was. And so farmers were able to get a tax stamp and pay a little bit of a fee to still grow hemp, but it was under a regulatory framework. Wisconsin was still a leader. So from the 1920s up until the last hemp was grown in 1957, Wisconsin was the #1 leader of hemp in the country. We really took off because of World War II. So again, our supply lines were cut off from Southeast Asia, where most of our hemp was being imported, and USDA actually had a program called Hemp for Victory, urging farmers to grow hemp for the war effort, whether it was the parachute cording, soldiers' uniforms, the shoes, the rope for all the Navy ships. This is where production of hemp really took off. And so when the U.S. government called, our farmers answered that call and did a very good job of doing that. Continuing with the history, so because of post-World War II, cheap labor in other markets, particularly Southeast Asia, there was really, we couldn't compete worldwide with hemp, and it eventually just kind of died out. It really got its death knell with the Controlled Substances Act in 1970. Congress basically did declare that hemp was the equivalent of marijuana, and if you were to grow it or do anything with it, you basically need a DEA permit to do anything with it. So from 1970 on, it really killed the industry. There was the Domestic Cannabis Eradication Suppression Program by DEA over a number of years. They were going after the marijuana plant, but because it looks so similar to the hemp plant, you may remember these images from the 1980s, 90s. You showed the big piles of marijuana that was being burned. More often than not, those piles were actually feral hemp, because about 98 to 99% of all marijuana that DEA destroyed was actually feral hemp, which was growing in fields or ditches or whatnot. Then came the 2014 Farm Bill. This was the opportunity for a resurgence of hemp. Basically, the Farm Bill declared that industrial hemp was anything that was less than 0.3% THC. And the Farm Bill gave states the right to grow, harvest, and market for research, as long as it's done within a university setting or a state pilot program put on by that state's Department of Agriculture. There's been continuing litigation with DEA, so there is still legal uncertainty out there with hemp and even the states that have the hemp pilot programs, but we're continually working through those issues. So are we late to the game? The answer is absolutely not. And I think the panelists up here are going to help explain that a little bit more. But to date, so Wisconsin became the 34th state in the country to have authorized a hemp pilot or research program. But there's probably roughly 10 to 12 states in the country that are really pursuing the industry and doing something with it. Everybody else is kind of sitting on the sidelines and waiting to see what happens. So there is a real opportunity for Wisconsin to really excel again in hemp in this country. So why are we not too late? I think there's numerous reasons, but the way that this legislation was crafted, I think is key to that. Act 100 was built around two main premises. One, we always have to be in compliance with federal law. So even if the feds change things up, whether they change the allowable THC content, or whatever they do, Wisconsin statutes are going to adapt to what that law change is. Other states have faced some challenges with this, where they've passed a hemp law, but it was embedded in their statutes where they couldn't really adapt and remain fluid, and so they've had to come back and do legislation again. Wisconsin hopefully will not be put in that situation, so we'll be able to adapt a lot quicker than what other states have been able to do. The other thing is language in statutes that says the state industrial hemp program must generally maximize opportunity for a person to plant, grow, cultivate, harvest, sample, test, process, transport, transfer, take possession of, sell, import, or export industrial hemp to the greatest extent under federal law. So this is basically directing DACAP that do whatever you can to maximize success for hemp in Wisconsin. Again, there are restrictions that other states have put in terms of how many acres you can grow, how many licenses you can issue each year. We did not give that directive to DACAP. They basically said you have to maximize opportunity. So I think this is a really good provision put in Act 100 to help hemp succeed in our state. Also, why we're not too late. So Wisconsin is number 2 in the country behind California in available organic acreage. As some of our panelists are going to tell you tonight, there is pretty good profitability with organics when it comes to hemp. And so because we have that acreage available, I think that puts us a step above some other states who struggle with organic acreage. We have a long experience history with hemp. You know, we still have people maybe in this room who grew it or know a dad or a grandfather, an uncle who grew hemp. And there's pride in this. We were the leader in this country, and we can certainly do it again. So I think that's something that's going to help us succeed in this. Also, the conditions like weather, soil, our ag diversity. We have strong food processing infrastructure. I think we have what we need to make sure that this hemp pilot program is going to succeed and really take off. I want to talk a little bit about what's happening at the federal level. There is a little bit of a symbiotic relationship with what's happening here in the state, but also what's going on at the feds, because that impacts what we can do here in the state of Wisconsin. So Congressman James Comer, First District from Kentucky, has introduced the Industrial Hemp Farming Act of 2017. He's not the first one to try to legalize hemp at the federal level. It's been an ongoing struggle, I think, for probably maybe 10 to 12 years. But this is definitely the best shot we've ever had to get a bill passed that would exempt hemp from Schedule 1 and recognize it as an agricultural commodity. I think the stars are starting to align on this. There's 39 co-sponsors on his bill right now. We're trying to get a heck of a lot more. But it's good to know that Wisconsin has 5 co-sponsors on Congressman Comer's bill. Congressman Grothman, Congressman Pocan, Congressman Kine, Congresswoman Moore, and Congressman Gallagher. So 5 of our 8 are signed on to this bill. So that should embolden you that your federal elected officials are really getting behind this idea as well. Is there trouble? So some of you here tonight maybe to talk about the grain side of hemp. Some are you here because of the CBD oil part of it. So I wanted to kind of give you just a little bit of flavor of what's happening at the federal level with regard to CBD. And I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to play a lawyer, but I at least want to give you some cautionary words as to what's happening with CBD at the federal level. On February 15th, the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco is going to hear a case from the Hemp Industry Association versus the DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Agency. The DEA has basically created a new drug code for marijuana extract. And the legal argument is that what HIA and others are offering or putting forward is that their marijuana extract rule is going to include all cannabinoids would be a Schedule 1. So this is THC, this is CBD, this is CBN, and I think there are about 120, 130 cannabinoids. These are chemical configurations within the cannabis plant. Some are useful, some aren't. But they're declaring all cannabinoids would be a Schedule 1. So if you're looking to do something within the CBD industry, you should be watching this case very closely. There was an amicus brief that was filed in support of HIA. 28 members of Congress, a few senators, and the rest were U.S. representatives, signed on to this amicus brief, basically supporting the HIA and telling the DEA you've gone beyond the bounds of the law, of what we wrote in the 2014 Farm Bill. And again, Congressman Grothman, Congresswoman Moore, and Congressman Pocan have signed on to this amicus brief. So they believe in this issue so much that they're willing to lend their name to an amicus brief to challenge the DEA, basically asking them to come in accordance with the law with what they passed in the 2014 Farm Bill. This crosses the political spectrum from the far right to the far left. This is an issue that a lot of them can agree on and try to push this issue forward. What's the status of CBD in Wisconsin? That's kind of a good question right now. So some of you may have heard or seen or noticed that the Wisconsin Department of Justice issued a memo on January 5th regarding the distribution and possession of cannabidiol, CBD, in Wisconsin. What they're saying is that retailers cannot dispense CBD unless they are operating under an investigative drug permit issued by a physician. There's more to it than this. I've simplified it. But also you cannot possess CBD without a certification issued by a physician. So if you are, say, owner of a salon and you're carrying some CBD-infused products, whether it's lotions or shampoos or something like that, you're basically being asked to remove those products from store shelves. If you're dispensing it, so Wisconsin has a law, it is Act 4, that basically legalized CBD for cases where you may need it for a medicinal use that is signed off by a physician. You may have known like Charlotte's Web, which for children who have epilepsy, this has been a real lifesaver for some of them. This deals not only with CBD for that use, but for other nutraceutical uses in lotions and shampoos and things of that nature. So again, if you're looking to get into the CBD oil business, you really want to follow what's happening here in the state of Wisconsin as well. That is all I have for now, so thank you for your time, and I guess I'd like to welcome Brian Kuna from DACAP to go on with his presentation.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm, again, Brian Kuhn with the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection, and the Plant Industry Bureau. And so the hemp program has landed in our bureau, as it does in most states that have one in place already. So I've got a number of slides, and I'll run through these pretty quick. Again, I think we've got the panel of experts here that have real-world experience growing hemp, dealing with hemp seed and hemp products. So I think that will really open up. I'm going to talk specifically about about the issues and the issues or the factors we're putting into the rule process that we have to build around the Act 100 that was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. So again, right now, industrial hemp represents an exciting opportunity, so I think it is something that, as Rob highlighted, that is a real high potential for Wisconsin. We've got a great growing climate and agriculture infrastructure for hemp, and it's some things that other states that are already in the program may not have. So I think we've got a good, strong advantage. And let's see if I can. What is it? There we go. Okay. Try this again. And I guess I would say, as is evidenced by the number of people in this room, there's a huge variety, a huge interest in hemp right now, just based on the phone calls we're getting at the department as we're writing these rules. Again, a tremendous volume of calls coming in, tremendous number of visits to our website. So it's very out of characteristic for the number of hits on a DATCAP website. The hemp site gets lots of attention every day, thousands of visits to look at and check in on what's going on with hemp in Wisconsin. So right now we are in the process of writing the administrative rules, and those are due out. Basically, the legislature or the governor signed it. The legislature's Act 100 said that we had 90 days from the day the governor signed it to write rules. So that's in the world of rule writing, that's an extremely short time frame. And I'll talk a little bit more about these rules and what type of rules we're working under. But that is our goal. That's the target. That's the plan. And with the idea that we would be accepting applications for hemp growing for 2018 growing season on or about the 2nd of March. Again, what we can tell you is a bit about the administrative rules that we're putting together and what that's going to address. Some of the specifics are set out in the Act 100, so we'll touch on those quickly as well. But definitely, even, if you Google 2017 Wisconsin Act 100, that's got all the specific language that was signed into law here. What we can't tell you, but probably our panel of experts will very much help here, is where to get certified seed, how to grow industrial hemp, how many people, and how much acreage there will be this year, and a lot of other questions that have come into us over the last few months. So there's a lot of questions about this. Our role is really, at least at this point in Wisconsin, there may be future roles for our ag development group and other parts, food safety and other aspects of our agency. But for right now, plant industry is focused on writing the rules that really regulate the growth of hemp in the state. It's basically from seed through harvest of the plant, and then it moves into the processing arena from there. Okay, this is, I guess, just a reminder, because in all the excitement sometimes, and Rob referenced this, that again, this is tied into the Farm Bill, and it is a research pilot program. So, that it's just a reminder that this is it involves research. We have to tie growers' work, what growers are doing in Wisconsin, back to the pilot research program. So there will be the collection of information, collection of data, reporting back into the State Department of Agriculture on data from your growing operations. As was referenced already, this is hemp is a rapidly evolving path with the regulatory picture that it sits in right now. So that brings some uncertainty to things. Again, we've got a group of folks up here. Some are growing hemp in other states, have lived through that uncertainty, and can probably speak well to that. But that's just the reality of where we're at right now. This is not something. It's not like growing any other crop currently, but in time, hopefully that regulatory picture will clear up and the regulatory burden will subside, and it will be just another crop that's in the mix of agricultural crops in Wisconsin. Again, Rob touched on much of this, but I'll just hit on a couple key items. The 2014 Farm Bill is the piece of federal legislation that really carved out a niche or carved out a room within the Controlled Substances Act to allow hemp to be grown again legally in states. But the Farm Bill basically says if states got these rules on the books that institutions of higher education and state departments of agriculture could grow hemp again for research purposes. And through extension, growers are basically are those researchers that we're talking about in this pilot program, acting as agents for the State Department of Agriculture to grow hemp and provide us feedback on what it's like to and what it takes, what grows well, what varieties are being planted, how are you harvesting it, where is it being processed, how are you marketing it, all those different aspects of what growers will be involved in here is information that the State Department of Agriculture is interested in getting and what connects us back to the Farm Bill. Again, Act 100 created that state law that allows us to now tap into this Farm Bill opportunity to grow hemp. And in that legislation, they limited THC levels to that 0.3% by dry weight. And so that's what defines, by definition, in the Farm Bill, hemp is that cannabis plant with a THC level of 0.3% or less. So that's an important number to remember kind of throughout the evening tonight. Then Act 100 came along, and as Rob referenced, bottom line is it said, we're going to create a program that's in compliance with the federal law, but we're going to create a program that provides the greatest possible opportunity to engage for our farmers to engage in those activities. And so that's whenever we're looking at decisions and thinking about things as we're working through this rulemaking process, that's kind of the statement that's ringing in our mind. So when people call and say, hey, are you going to limit the number of growers? We're not limiting the number of growers. Are you going to limit the number of acres? We don't have a plan to limit acres. So we keep trying to listen to that mantra and work with that as kind of an operating base. And then the challenging part for us was that they gave us 3 months to figure out how to pull that together. So that's what we're focused on and working on very intensely right now. Act 100, again, these are a number of items that Act 100 said that DATCAP would do, so we shall do these things. And the items in yellow there, again, we're going to have an initial fee. And that fee will be structured based on acres planted. There's confidentiality that will have to be maintained with the growers so that information of hemp field locations and most of the information, pretty much all the information about this program will be maintained in DATCAP files as confidential. There's set the licensing requirements, a registration system for authorizing the sampling, testing, processing, et cetera. It allows and requires us to do a criminal history. So again, I'm going to be talking about things tonight here that are things growers that are doing, your normal agricultural activities are not used to hearing or thinking about when you're producing a crop. So having to have a grower have a criminal background history, have a criminal history done is one of those items. But that's defined there, and that's something that has got to be included in it right now. GPS coordinates for the fields where hemp's going to be grown, and then a chain of custody that basically follows this hemp through the whole production cycle through processing. That chain of custody kind of ends when hemp is delivered to a processor where it's going to go from being a hemp plant into some product and processed further. Basically, it also said that we can assess an annual fee. Again, the Act did not provide us any funding for the administration of the hemp program or any staffing to do this, so We're running it with the staff we've got and getting it in place. But it does allow for an annual fee and the ability to charge fees through the program to recover costs so we can operate the program going forward. So there will be fees, and I'll talk in a little bit more detail about those. Again, they haven't been established. We haven't set those yet. We're still working on that part of the rule as we speak. This is going to be ATCP 20-something. Right now, most of our plant pest and disease rules that my group works with are in ATCP 21. But we'll be writing the administrative rule. And right now, that rule is the legislature provided the framework and the big picture map to growing hemp and what they envisioned with that Act 100. Now we've got to write the details of that. How do you do all the details of that process? If they wrote the roadmap, we've got to put in the speed limits and the street signs and all the details that go along with that. But our rules do carry the force of law, and they will be going back to the legislature for final approval in the process we're in right now. Again, what we're doing at this moment is emergency rules. So the legislature and the governor gave us 90 days to develop the emergency rules, so March 2nd, as I mentioned. And this is like lightning fast for the rulemaking process. Typically, the rulemaking process is about a 2-year process to go from start to finish on an administrative rule. And, the reason for this very defined 90-day, 3-month window to write these rules was that the legislature's intent was we'd be getting some level of seeds, some hemp grown in the state of Wisconsin in 2018. So we understand that directive and that goal, and that's what we're shooting for and working hard on at the Department of Agriculture. But you couldn't do this through the standard rule writing process. So you have to rely on emergency rules for this. The legislature provided some other benefits and things that they took out of the way that we would normally have to go through to get these rules in place quickly. So it'll meet the immediate need, but they are temporary in nature. And these don't provide a formal public input process. So we're taking public input from all the calls we're getting and getting lots of emails on ideas and thoughts, and it's coming in from other states that already have hemp programs and from businesses that are working in other states and what's worked well in there. So we are certainly taking all that feedback into consideration as we're writing the rules. But we will be moving from this one. We'll quickly have to transition once we get these done and start licensing hemp growers. We'll quickly be moving into the permanent rulemaking process. And those rules have to be out by July 2020 was the deadline that the legislature set for us to write those rules. So we'll get these emergency rules in. We'll start operating a program. We'll be licensing folks. Hemp will be grown. We'll be learning a lot through the process. And we will likely, when we make those permanent rules, they will likely be at least a bit different than the emergency rules, because we're not filling in some of the detail that will probably come when we put permanent rules into place, and we're not addressing necessarily every single detail that the legislature identified in Act 100. That will come in time. And that permanent rulemaking process, again, identify here that again, there's going to be stakeholder meetings. There will be multiple public comment periods in that rule process, just like all of our standard rulemaking processes. So there will be lots of opportunity for public input to the permanent rule, unlike what we've got right now with the emergency rule and the pace with which we're moving. So look ahead to that. I guess the other thing I'd highlight here is that we're certainly taking lessons from all the states that have gone before us and have been talking with those states for a number of years leading up to this point. So the other states have been very willing to share information with us. So we've talked a lot with Kentucky, a lot with Colorado, New York, Minnesota are some of the primary states that we're mining information and experience from. And in fact, trying to craft in the time frame that we've got, trying to craft the language using a lot of the good things that are already out there and tweaking them to meet our statutory charge here. The emergency rule, again, this is just a quick summary of the overview of it, licensing requirements and procedures, the registration process, sampling and testing. Again, this is different than any crop you've grown. You've got to sample it, test it, have it sent in for analysis. Is it hemp? Is it not hemp? Based on the results of that testing. So sampling and testing, again, that's our staff coming out into the field, collecting samples of the plant tissue and having that analyzed at a lab. We'll be talking about fees in there, the penalties, and seed certification as well. So we'll basically be writing in Wisconsin Crop Improvement Association as the seed certifying agency. It's the seed certifying agency for Wisconsin overall. So they would be the same entity that would be certifying hemp seed in Wisconsin when we get to that point. And there will also be conditions identified in grower agreements. So a grower agreement is is a legal document between the pilot research grower and the Department of Agriculture. And most of the hemp states out there have this in place. So it's basically that thing that really ties you directly into the research component that the Farm Bill allows us to be operating under. So that's something that a clear linkage that has to be made between the growers and the department, since the 2014 Farm Bill provides the department that opportunity to grow hemp. To basically move that on to growers, they have to be in that research mode with us. Things to consider. So there's a lot of factors, and you've heard a lot about the uncertainty tied to kind of the evolving arena that hemp falls in right now. Again, we've applied for a DEA seed import registration. The state has. In a number of the other pilot states, that's an opportunity that the states have taken advantage of and helped facilitate the importation of hemp seed into the state. Well, based on the timing of the legislation and what it takes to get a permit in place, again, it is very unlikely, and I would say we will not have that opportunity this growing season. So 2018, again, we won't have that opportunity. The growers were going to have to be working with others to secure seed independently from the department. Again, we hope that's something that we can bring. In fact, we've got meetings with DEA day after tomorrow to talk more about that process. But again, shows the unusual nature of this. We have to go as a department and get a permit from the DEA to be able to import hemp seed into the state. Again, our panel, I think, will talk more specifically and maybe can give you a little more comfort on the hemp seed side of things. Certified seed, I want to touch on this because the Act 100, again, to provide the broadest opportunity, did not limit the planting of seed in the state to only certified seed. They didn't define it that it has to be that it can be limited to only certified seed. But I guess I would highlight that, and you as growers probably know this well, but certainly strongly recommend certified seed be planted based on a number of benefits it brings. And I'd say one of the big ones is, again, the Act 100 does provide protections against state prosecution if you're planting certified seed. So it gives you a built-in exemption from state prosecution if you were to run afoul of again the law in this process. Certified hemp seed produced in any state, I think that you're all familiar with this, whether it's in another state or another nation, that hemp seed will give you that same protections. Again, we're just saying if it's certified hemp seed coming out of Colorado, for certified hemp seed from Kentucky, eventually from Wisconsin, it's certified hemp seed, and you would have those protections. And again, certified hemp seed, another benefit to it is, again, it's more likely that you will produce a crop with that low THC level that you're looking for, that 0.3% or less, which would avoid that concept of having to destroy the crop. So there's a couple things I stated in here, again, that highlight that this issue of this is not the standard crop. The fact that talking about the fact that it provides you exemptions from prosecution is one of those, and that your crop doesn't have to be destroyed is another one. So So again, those are two things that really stand out to me that just highlight the regulatory nature of this, that you got to be going into this with your eyes wide open, knowing what you're getting into, doing your homework, learning from others. But it's not planting corn and soybeans. It comes with a strong regulatory component. And from conversations we're having with the hemp industry, again, the other factor for the demand on certified seed is industries demanding it. The quality of the products that they're looking for coming out of the hemp industry and the hemp arena are mandating the planting of certified seed so that they can get quality products out of the other end of that pipeline. Again, buying seed is a bit of a gray area we've talked about, but others here tonight will talk more about that and their experiences with it. But DADCAP's not going to be able and won't be facilitating that kind of the importation of seed into the state this year or the movement of seed from other states here. I think I'll leave it at that. Things to consider, again, more things. We've got an initial fee. We've talked about that. Registration fee, that's an annual fee that will be part of the program. The licensing fee, which is this initial fee, as identified in the Act 100, is a one-time fee. So it's your initial license fee. Once you're licensed, you're basically licensed forever as long as you are in good standing and haven't had any violations or any issues. And then there would be an annual registration fee. You'll have to re-engage with the department on an annual basis. What kind of acreage are you growing? I could envision scenarios where we get a lot of people licensed, and I'd say this has happened in more often than not in other states. For example, recently talking to Kentucky, they identified that they may have something like 400 licensees licensed to grow about 12,000 acres of hemp, but in the end of the season, they grew about 3,800 acres of hemp. Out of that 12,000 possible, those other growers didn't utilize those licenses, didn't grow or grew at very small acreages. Again, there's inspection and sampling fees that come along for the department to come out there, and basically we're going to have to come out and collect that regulatory sample. It can't be collected by the growers. It's one that the department will have to do. At least initially, that's how we envision that working. And then we'd bring that back to the state lab for analysis. All right. Other things to consider before jumping in, as the legislature defined it, again, GPS coordinates, access to your fields, background checks. So I guess the highlight here is that this is an interactive process with the regulatory folks. So there just are things that are going to be required by this program that aren't things that normally are required. People aren't generally coming out, at least from a regulatory agency, to check on your crops during the growing season. So just things to keep in mind, and again, to understand what you're interested in your involvement in this program. Need to, again, we referenced this earlier, need to apply for a license only once, annual registration. There is the grower agreement that I referenced earlier. And again, that's a legal agreement between the department and the pilot participant, again, tying the grower into that industrial hemp research program, again, as someone collecting data for the department on planting, growing, harvesting, and the sale of that hemp. So all things that we're interested in learning about and helping gather that information so we can facilitate stuff moving forward in the growth of the program overall. Over time, again, the hope is right now they're working on a 2018 Farm Bill. I think Rob referenced this. It's time for reauthorization of the Farm Bill. There's certainly a lot of talk and focus on these provisions that we're talking about related to industrial hemp, so a good opportunity for some change to occur at the congressional level on this. Again, when you plant the hemp crop, again, you're basically committing to kind of see this through at the end of the season. It's either going to be harvested and processed or destroyed. It's a regulated material basically, and And so it's either going off to processing, you test it, you get confirmation that your THC is below that, or is at or below 3.3%, moves off to processing. If it's above 0.3%, there's some retesting potential that we're looking at in there. But if it's above that 0.3%, then you're also looking at destruction. So again, these are some of those things that, again, you need to have eyes wide open. Good reason to, again, look back at certified seed. And again, I think growers here and folks here with experience will speak to these issues and maybe give you some comfort on a number of these things. As has been referenced in the media a number of times through lots of reports, is basically the cautionary statement is don't grow hemp on speculation, know where you're going with it, have a market, make sure you know what your plan is with hemp. Don't need to dwell on that. But that's probably that's the consistent theme, is there is uncertainty currently. Hopefully that uncertainty will clear up in the very near future. I think it is, while it's rapidly evolving, it takes a number of years to work through issues back and forth. But Congress is paying attention. Mitch McConnell from Kentucky is really pushing the hemp arena, and so there's a lot of power there, and so that probably plays well to hemp. Things to consider, again, there are no registered pesticides currently labeled for use on industrial hemp, so that's just something to be aware of. And there are no, if your hemp is moving into the food arena, there are no pesticide tolerances for pesticides on hemp that goes into the food chain. Again, there are some minimum risk pesticides allowed, and again, I think the panel will be able to speak a little bit more to what folks are doing, what they're seeing from a pest standpoint. Some other details in here, SNAP Plus nutrient management plan that many of you are aware of. Again, industrial hemp's kind of being pulled into that discussion as well and needs to be included in your nutrient management planning. Again, harvesting, something we're unfamiliar with, but wanting to learn through this process, and that may take different and modified equipment. Again, DATCAP's role is regulatory right now. In time, there'll be other roles for the department, for other parts of DATCAP to get involved into, and maybe other state agencies as well. But we're not the experts in growing it, marketing it, harvesting it, or any of those things right now. Some of those experts are here, and again, hopefully we'll be able to talk in a little bit more detail about that. But certainly recommend that folks look at other state websites. Again, Kentucky is one that Farm Bureau and the legislature was looking at closely as they were writing that Act 100. So that would be one that I would say is probably on the heavy side of the regulatory framework. They hold a fairly strict Farm Bill reading, and other states have variations. So Colorado, like I say, Minnesota, we're looking closely at and trying to mesh up fairly close to what Minnesota is doing, since it's a neighbor state and we'll have growers on both sides of that line. Trying to be fairly consistent there, as consistent as we can, but learning from all the other states that have hemp programs in place. Again, this is the DATCAP website. You can just Google Wisconsin Department of Agriculture. You'll get our website. On there's a hemp link on the opening page. On that site, there's a button you can click to get information pushed to you via email. So that opportunity is right there on the website. Whenever the rules come out, whenever we've got updates to provide, those can be pushed out to you directly if you go to the website and ask for that. So, yeah, again, we're hoping to and working hard to get our rule in place by that March 2nd deadline, and that's the goal. So I think that's it for me on the presentation. And I think we're going to set up with the panel discussion, and then we'll take questions through that, and then an open question and answer forum later, as I understand it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Brian. What we will do now is hear from our panel and then kind of proceed it. Brian will be part of that panel. I think if there's questions policy-wise for Rob, I think he's willing to pop back up here and answer some questions too. So I think what we will try to do is kind of work through our panel a little bit with some of the questions that are pretty common. And then once we wrap up with those, we'll open the floor up for any questions that we're missing. So I think I'd like to start with Bill Barker as the Associate Dean for Research for UW-Madison and the College of Ag and Life Sciences. And even though it's a research project through DADCAP, Madison is our research institution for the most part with UW and the UW system, although we do a little bit of research on some other campuses. So Bill, can you talk to us about what you're hearing in the research community from your colleagues discussing research possibilities, and where could those lead on the scale from UW-Madison?
Thank you, Jerry. Can you hear me? Is this working? Not working. Yeah, it's working. Well, like you all, this sort of came up in the rearview mirror pretty quickly, right? So I feel the pain of the DADCAP folks that are trying to write the rules in 90 days. Our role as your flagship land-grant university is to be the research and development arm of the agriculture industry, a role we've performed for over 130 years. And this will be no different. I've heard from a number of faculty who are interested. I was at the Organic Grains Conference this weekend in Madison, and there was a lot of talk and interest around how you grow hemp in Wisconsin. I think one thing we have in our favor is that we know historically we've been able to do quite well growing hemp in Wisconsin. And there are many strains of cannabis sativa now that meet the legal definition of industrial hemp at 0.3% dry weight of THC content. If you stick with those certified seeds, you should, and they've been tested, you should be okay. I've heard from agricultural engineers. So the last list you saw from DADCAP was you're going to have to modify your equipment perhaps. And I've heard these great stories about people trying to harvest hemp with a combine and making these rope balls that catch on fire and shoot out of the combine. And it's just, clearly there's a lot of R&D that needs to be done. And so a couple of agricultural engineers are interested in growing plots on some of our ag research stations, of which we have 11 scattered around the state, our experimental farms. And they want to know, for example, does no-till work, and what kind of harvesting equipment are you going to need to be able to harvest the seeds? And Carrie Lebowski, Dr. Carrie Lebowski, is a soil scientist at UW-Madison, and she's she's the person that's responsible for the SNAP Plus nutrient management guidelines around fertilizer. And we're gonna fudge it a little bit this year by referencing Minnesota's guidelines, which reference Canada's guidelines. But clearly, that's another research opportunity. The plant breeders are excited about this opportunity, but that's a multi-year project to collect feral hemp and find out what the THC contents are, how stable those traits are, what grows well in Wisconsin. And the last folks I've heard from are the organic grain breeders. But again, it's just around, agronomic practices at this point. Does this stuff work in a cover crop? Is it really good at building soil carbon like the hemp industry says it is? There again, that'll depend on what kind of soils you're growing it in, what the local microclimates are. It might perform really differently in good, rich prairie soil at Arlington Station. It might not do so well up at Spooner in the muck soils. Might do great in the sand counties. We just don't know yet, but that's the type of things the university would be interested in. And since this is a research project and y'all are going to be participating in that, we'll actually get a lot of data from all around the state by partnering with you all through your extension agents. So we've got a really good system in place that's worked really well for Wisconsin agriculture for a long time, and I think this will work well too. Just takes money, research funding money, so it's the only thing we're missing at this point. So
Bill, just a quick follow-up on that. Any byproduct type stuff? I know I've received questions that we know it can be used for seed and the fiber, but what about feed, animal feed, anything like that?
It's not legal as a feed additive anywhere in the United States. You can eat it yourself, but you can't feed it to your chickens, right? So there's been some research in Europe where they have a longer history with this, and they find that crushed seed cake and things like that are really quite good for animals. In this country, the issues are, for example, if you're feeding your chickens, is it good for your chickens, or is there going to be a THC extract that shows up in the eggs? Same with milk. So, I mean, these are valid questions, right? It's one thing to be eating hemp seed and knowing what you're getting into and buying eggs that are, I mean, the stuff's really rich in omega-6 and 3, and so it's got potential.
All right, thank you, Bill. I'd like to Patrick Robinson, on the end of the table there is the Associate Dean for UW Cooperative Extension, so kind of our administrative arm of the county agent system, so to speak, if you're familiar with that. Patrick, could you, how are extension agents going to be working with this, or the interest level that's coming, that you're hearing from the county side of things?
Yeah, so as we've talked already tonight, this is an atypical crop with a lot of unusual circumstances surrounding it. And it's, as Bill said, it's been sort of drinking through a fire hose in terms of the amount of information requests that are coming in, and then trying to scramble to make sure that we're not providing bad information in the short term and preparing ourselves for providing really good information moving forward. So if you're not really familiar with cooperative extension, we have an investment in extension specialists that work on campus and will be deeply involved in the campus research side of this through the kind of mechanisms that Bill described. So Carrie is an extension specialist as well as a UW-Madison professor. So a lot of the work that is going on campus will have some extension involvement. So there's that research piece, which I won't delve any more on that because Bill covered it very nicely. And then we've got the Extension County Educator Network that I think most of you are pretty familiar with, and they provide a link to that research that needs to occur. So they're our education and outreach side of it. We've been trying our best to triage information that's coming in right now. One of the challenges we face in the short term is these administrative rules, the emergency rules, are really important to our understanding of the kind of outreach that needs to be done around the new rules and around the needs of producers as they start to venture into this new realm. So to try to address that, we have very recently formed a working group of colleagues that are right now working on developing some frequently asked questions forms, some resources. They're going to be working on some basic publications to get out to all of you to help meet some of that information gap. So we've got some folks working on it right now. The nice thing for us, this has been mentioned a couple of times, is that we're not working in a vacuum. We can look at some of the other examples that are out there for some of the other states and learn from some of that. We'll need to be customizing that over the years, as Bill suggested, through our own research effort here in Wisconsin. But we're working on it. We want to be able to provide good information to all of you and the rest of the state as we start to move into this. So extension agents have been mobilizing, and lots of questions have been coming in. We definitely have heard you. I just want you to know that my inbox exploded. I all of a sudden immediately turned all my attention towards industrial hemp for about a solid week to try to gear us up to be ready to respond. So we're working on it.
So thank you, Patrick. And then if I could just move to Ken Anderson. Ken is he's the founder and president of Legacy Hemp, LLC. And so, Ken, in your experience, what are some of the barriers that farmers are going to find entering into that, into this crop?
Well, I think the barriers to entry are first and foremost. Obviously, there's quite a bit of interest in growing hemp, but I always say let's start at the end and make sure that we have a market that we're going into. Don't be growing on spec thinking that someone at the end of the day is going to be handing you a check. Make sure you have a contract, because you cannot go to just your local elevator and say, what's the cash price for hemp today? So that's something that we stress. But really, if you're already row cropping with most of the crops, you're going to have the equipment that you need. The equipment, as far as modification, we don't see it so much if you know what you're doing, and that's as far as not trying to take too much fiber. If you're after the grain, not trying to take too much fiber. But in Wisconsin, I definitely have to say too that we have to wait until March 2nd to get these. February 2nd. Is it March 2nd? March 2nd. Sorry, I was giving you 60 days. We really have to make sure that the rules are in place so we know that is a barrier right now, because I can't contract any of you to grow hemp for us until you're licensed to do so. So the barriers are first, knowledge, being able to, none of you have probably grown hemp before, so the information is out there. You probably have the equipment, but with us, we deal mostly in food grade, and a barrier there that we're noticing is not everyone, especially in the organic realm, has adequate on-farm storage for us to call. And post-harvest is kind of the biggest issue that we're seeing, because the grain does really well while it's on the stalk, but as soon as you take it off, if you don't handle it properly and get it dried down to where we can call it, we can have you grow a whole bunch of great premium hemp and it gets spoiled in a bin. So really educating yourself on the post-harvest part is one of the barriers for sure.
Okay, thanks, Ken. I'd like to move to Neil for a little bit. He's the co-owner, production manager of Legacy Hemp LLC. Can you just talk about some of the seeding rates, those kind of things that are kind of from that production standpoint? I know many farmers have had those questions on that production side.
Well, with seeding rates and seeding in general, obviously, we'll leave a lot of those questions to Dennis here, but first of all, start with good fertile soil, good organic matter, well drained. Want a good firm seed bed, because we're going to be seeding very, very shallow, ½ inch, not to exceed an inch, but ideally a ½ an inch deep. Warm soil temperatures are ideal, 50 degrees plus, pushing 60. We did not get our crop in due to some barriers we ran into getting our seed in until the 2nd of June. Ground temperatures were just over the 60-degree mark. We seeded it in good firm soils. The emergence, the germination was tremendous. The emergence was 3 days in this. We were seeing crop out of the ground. We experimented with some different seeding rates, different seeding widths. We tried 15-inch rows and 7.5-inch row. The 15-inch row was worked out real well. It closed the rows real fast as the crop developed. 7.5-inch row, though, in organic, I think you would find a better fit for row closure, for weed suppression, I think is really what you'd be looking for in the organic side of things. Does that answer some of the seeding rates? Yeah, we were at 30 pounds to the acre. We did drop down. We tried at 26 up to 32, and the mortality rates, the 1,000 kernel seed count per gram is some things you really need to take into effect. Like a soybean, you need to know your seed size. Ideally, 10 to 12 plants per square foot. And with germination, in the 90s, we want to have at least 5 to 7 live growing plants in that foot squared area. So we found that with the mortality comes from a lot of different things. Air seeders, of course, the seed banging against the manifolds and cracking, a lot like a soybean seed. As that husk peels off the outer side of that kernel, you will not get a germination on it. So seed handling is a must, very safe seed handling.
Thanks, Neil.
Yes.
Yeah, if we can move to Dennis, you talked about some of that growing conditions, for maybe some of the agronomics, some of the fertility, weed control. I don't know if cost of production, but maybe that's something all three of you can maybe start to address as we move the microphone around a little bit.
Okay. First and foremost, we need to start with a good soil test. That's the first and foremost thing we need to work with. We need to have a complete soil test with base saturation, trace elements, sulfur, everything, so that we can tell what's going on with that soil before we go and try and plant the hemp. That's very critical. You want to have 50% air, 50% water in that soil, so you want to have good air and water movement within that soil so that that plant will flourish, the soil will flourish, the microbes will flourish. So those are all very important. We want to try to get a balanced soil fertility. Very important to have equal balance of calcium and magnesium, around 7-to-1 ratio, somewhere around there. So that's extremely important. The healthier that soil, the healthier that crop is going to be, and then the better the seed that we're going to get out the back end. Hemp is very high in protein and high in oil. So we believe that sulfur is very important as well. There's not a lot of research on the sulfur part of it in Canada, but I believe that we need to put the sulfur out there for sure. And in the Wisconsin soils and some of these sand areas, you're definitely going to want to put sulfur out there because our soil tests are low in sulfur to start with. So that's very critical. Nitrogen-wise, we're ballpark around 70 to 90 pounds per acre. 35 pounds or so of P2O5, 50 pounds of K2O, and then, as I mentioned, about 24 pounds or so of sulfur. But we need that soil test first to really determine, how many nutrients or fertilizer program, to go with.
Anything else on like cost of production, those kind of things, in terms of what you estimate, maybe dollars per acre investment, those kind of things? I know that's going to vary, but
Sure. Well, cost of production varies on a lot of different variables, but overall, we figure right around we had about 32 cents a pound was our break-even point, and with that, of course, that could have changed. Higher yield. A lot of mine was on some irrigated land that was expensive rent. We faced some issues through the growing season. We suffered some extreme wind damage on some very light soils, extremely sandy soil on some irrigation following potato rotation. So ideally, very, very important before you put your crop in the ground is to understand your chemical carryovers from your previous crops. And a lot of these are susceptible, and they carry, up to 18 months into the next season. So, if it's corn, soybean rotation, maybe not so much on the soybean side, but different things you may have used in your corn, just be aware working through your extension agent is very important. Here in Wisconsin, you really have something going here because in North Dakota, I did not have this backing. Matter of fact, if I may, my extension agent came out and was going to ask a county extension agent if she could write a little article up, and we visited a little bit, and she was told to just stay away from it. Do not get involved. What you have going on here in Wisconsin is fantastic. You really got something here. So, did I answer that question?
good. You hear that, Patrick? All right.
I didn't even pay you. Yeah.
That's good. Just a couple more questions, and then I think we can open it up to anything the crowd's got. Many of these questions maybe are similar to what people are interested in. But I think, Brian, one thing that you mentioned about some of the regulation on this, what we heard earlier, is do you have to put some kind of security around the field? Is there anything to that? I mean, it's going to be GPS, but is there other things you're finding from other states that growers maybe need to mark it off or something like that?
Well, I know there were a lot of discussions in other states about this. Talking with my counterparts in New York, went round and round on what level of protection was going to be required for fencing and other kind of things. And in the end, again, I think like all of us, we're trying to get it to be just a crop. And so in the end, they ended up coming to that agreement in their state. Therefore, we didn't have to live necessarily that same dialogue here. And again, so right now, no, there is no security requirements that we're looking at to build into our rule right now. I think growers are going to need to think about that on their own. If this, if a field of hemp is going to get attention, where do you want to place that in your, where do you want to keep tabs on it? Do you want it to be isolated? I mean, it's going to be grower call. What's the safest thing for you based on that field? But there are not going to be requirements in the rule that are going to identify that any kind of significant barriers or anything else need to be constructed for security around hemp fields. I don't know if other states or if you guys have experienced anything in any other states at this point.
Well, in 1999 to 2001, work in Hawaii, you had to have a 14-foot cyclone fence around your fields, and that made it not many farmers wanted to participate in that. So, and we've seen too mostly that some people have put up signs, and they usually attract more attention than just the field itself.
Yeah. And then I got one more question for Bill regarding some of the testing. I know DADCAP will be testing, I'm guessing, to make sure it's the right THC levels, these kind of things. And maybe it fits in with the storage thing. Is there a quality test that you're aware of? Will the university be offering seed analysis, that kind of thing, through this Crop Improvement Association, anything like that might be available?
The Crop Improvement Association will be the entity that certifies that the seed meets the certification requirements, but the university won't be. That's a not-for-profit. They're housed in our buildings, right, but they're their own thing.
Okay, so we'll be going through the Crop Improvement Association.
That's what DADCAP
uses. Okay, thank you. So I think we've been talking enough as far as we'll cover some things as we go. So I don't know.
This is for Brian. You talked about the crop would have to be processed, et cetera, destroyed. Are you talking about the seeds, or are we open to store or bale up or whatever we want to do with the fiber portion? Or is it only relative to the seeds?
And Brian, before you answer, can everybody hear that? Otherwise, I'll repeat them quick. I'll repeat them. So it's basically about process, or as the crop's harvested, talked about destroying the crop, those kind of questions about how that gets handled after the crop is harvested, and residue. What do you do with the residue after the year? Store that, bale it, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the you're talking about the crop itself. If you're doing fiber, how that's stored. Yeah, right now I think what we need to know that it's going to a market. We've got to have it. Can you hear that? Any better? I'm trying to talk into the little one. Is this better? All right. Talking into the little mic. Yeah. So the concept is, again, that we've got a chain of custody on the crop.
The entire crop, the fiber and the seeds.
Yeah, following it through. So if portions of that go off, if you're envisioning it, if you're in multiple markets, if you've got a seed crop that goes off or a grain crop that goes off, that goes down one supply chain line or processing line. If fiber is another market that you're tapping into, that we'd need to track that as well. Right now, that's the Act 100 basically identifies kind of a cradle to grave, and grave meaning going to processing in some form, that we would track this. And that's the intent here, is that it is viewing it almost as a regulated material, so needing to know that end point. Where did it end up? We can't have a field of hemp just sitting left out there. And that's one of the things we were talking about is, if you didn't harvest it, that I think that's one that something has to be done with that field. It's either got to be tilled down or addressed in some fashion. And because of some of the things we talked about with laboratory analysis, I can envision scenarios where a grower might say, and we've heard this from a lot of people, hey, I want to grow a half acre. I want to just see what it's like to grow this stuff. But they may not want to be interested in having DATCAP come out and drive out there and collect a sample and do a whatever that analysis, $100 or $200 analysis on that sample for their half acre that they were just testing the growing process on. So that's, I could envision scenarios where they would just say, we're not testing, we just wanted to see how it would be to grow this, how it would grow here on our farm. We're going to plow it down, and we would have to document that process. So there, in the end, there is a reporting out from the growers on what did I do with my hemp, where did it go, and kind of tracking that through.
Right back there. Yes.
What's the chance of having volunteer hemp coming the next year?
So the chances of having volunteer hemp the next year, so as that seed is shot out the back of the combine or something, I'll let you.
Very good. You will have volunteer hemp. Yes, there will be volunteer hemp, and it will be one of the first ones to emerge out of the ground.
So is there a way to control that from becoming seed?
Well, yes. You're going to wait till you have complete total emergence and watch your fields. Depending on, obviously, organic is going to require some tillage. On the grain side of things, Roundup 2,4-D, you're going to get a real good kill. Your glyphosates and your phenoxys, those things, you will get them gone.
Is there a crop rotation that you find is working better in terms of adding this crop into a farmer's rotation?
Yeah, certainly you would not want to follow a cereal grain, a wheat, a barley, something to that effect. Hemp is non-gluten, so we would not want to get any of that mixed in. And besides that, it's very hard to clean out with similar densities in seed size. Follows very good with legumes, a hay rotation, and least but not last, corn.
Thank you. So, back there.
Brian, I guess how the Trade and Consumer Protection has got it all kind of planned up a little bit for the growers and all that, but now say the guy who wants to do the processing, does the trail end when the processor gets by his place and he's free to do what he wants? Or I guess what's going to continue on? I mean, you don't have nothing after when it gets to the processor. Who is liable, or what happens after that?
Yeah, believing that basically all of those different processing chains have their own regulatory frameworks that they fall under as well. So if it's going down the food side, there's going to be a food testing component to that, pesticide residue testing, other things that we're not requiring because we're just regulating the growth of it. Once it starts entering into different supply chains and different processing chains, those are going to have their own requirements depending on what that hemp ends up going into.
Once hemp is processed too, there's no portion of it that would be considered a Schedule I narcotic. So that's where any type of the licensing or anything, all of these products are legal for sale in all 50 states. So the only thing that would be considered, you would need a permit for is the live grain. So once you destroy the grain by processing it, you're no longer in possession of anything that you would need a permit for. So it just comes down to your food safety standards and such.
Okay. Other questions right here in front?
You mentioned post-harvest can be tricky. Can you go into more detail on how volatile the seed is?
Okay.
Post-harvest?
The question is on some of the post-harvest challenges and that type of thing. So.
Yes, that post-harvest is probably the trickiest part, right after harvest itself. But getting that seed into storable condition is vitally important, and just taking it back a step right at harvest. We started harvesting anywhere around 22 moisture, finished our harvest down to under 14 moisture. At the 22 moisture, we run into some really, actually the harvesting conditions were real good. The fiber, I'll get to here, the fiber was, it wasn't not in the retting in the real fibrous portion yet, so it ran through the combine very well. As the moisture started coming down, the plant was becoming more mature as time progressed. The retting process kind of started to take place, so to speak, and it became very fibrous and wanted to wrap, hang, bunch, collect everywhere, anywhere. It would hang up on the head of a 3/8 bolt. Duct tape will be one of your best friends, and a very good fixed blade sharp knife. And you'll be sharpening it daily. As far as getting it storable, very important, when you need to remove all foreign material, get it right down to pure seed best you can. We purchased density cleaner through Grain Cleaner LLC out of Anoka, Minnesota, which once very easy machine to run, really worked good. It we were able to. We really didn't have much for stalks, things like that. Just a lot of leafy material that was easily removed. Some of the blank seeds were removed. And then when we had it to pure seed, into the bin, low and slow, of course, keep the augers full, even in your harvesting equipment when you're unloading your machine, idle the machines down, keep that auger full, keep it slow. Do not take full hoppers at a time. If it takes you 2 hours to get a full hopper, if it takes you an hour to get a full hopper, do not do that. Go in with a half a hopper or less. Don't let your truck sit at the end of the field with a half a load on. Get that home, get that cleaned, get it into a bin with a lot of air. And it will heat. It'll heat fast. And it will spoil. So proper handling is of very, very important.
What month did he take it?
Well, we started harvest in September. Yes. Yep.
One of the things that are very important too is a lot of times we find, so we want to get the foreign material out to help get our moisture down, and I wanted to point out in our, the buck stops with me. I should have had this edited before, but in our harvest it says that combining at 12 to 15% growing moisture, that's a no-no. We're going to want to be up around the 16 to 18 is kind of optimum. What he was talking about, the more moisture that we have in the grain, the easier it is to harvest. You're going to have a lot more time then, to get your moisture down to storable condition. So that's an issue there. But really, the not letting it sit. If you're just field run coming in, you can't let that sit very long. I mean, I showed him we had harvested, and a day later the auger hadn't been cleaned out, and I told his guys, I said, clean that auger out in the combine. And well, what for? We're wasting seed here. And I said, clean that auger out. They threw it on the ground, and we had probably about 60% of it sprouting already. So when it heats, you're going to have issues, especially in food grade. So the biggie is to get the foreign material out, get air on it right away. Don't like to use heat on it. Don't need to use heat. Get air on it, and then we do a lot of bin transfers.
Don't want to exceed 150 degrees.
Yeah, do not want to exceed 150 degrees with heat for sure. We don't use heat. We try not to. But that is really like I say, I mean, this grain does really well while it's on the stalk. But as soon as you get it off the stalk, if you don't manage it properly to get it dried down, you can destroy your harvest, and that doesn't do anyone any good. So.
caution there.
How well does the stock break down?
Quick question, what's the yield on this, and then how quick does that stock break down? But what's some average yields that we could expect from?
Well, you could easily expect, 1,200 pounds easily, up to 1,800, well managed, well maintained, ideal situations. 2,000 pounds isn't out of the question.
Depends on your seed. Depends on your seed and your growing conditions, but really, 1,000 pounds is a very simple baseline, and if you're doing 1,000 pounds, you're not doing as well as you can. So that's all I'm going to say with that one.
Is test weight or anything quality other than what DADCAP's going to be screening for? But what's some of the quality measures that you'd be looking at?
Well, for us, I mean, we really in the food grade it is quality. So your seed size is really what is the biggie, but also not just the seed size, but we actually are after nutritional density. So it's more than just the quantity. We want to make sure that grain that we're buying from you is as nutritionally dense as it can be. So that's following a good program with your soil management, crop management, your inputs. But right now, you see common grain prices out of Canada there, and then there's also premium markets. So, as far as making money, if you're doing certified seed production, that's kind of the pinnacle. Below that would be your organic production, and below that would be conventional production.
What are the numbers for those categories? That
Where are you at with the?
you're talking prices?
So Canada prices are what everyone bases off, and right now they've come down because of a kind of a glut in the market in Canada, because they made, a lot of people went long and wrong, which is a bad thing. But so in organic right now, Canada is at $1.06 a pound. And the conventional grain would be at between 44 and 48 cents a pound. This year, we'll be contracting for a little bit. We're staying at last year's prices for our contracts. So I can speak for our company, and right now we're contracting certified seed. We pay $1.25 a pound. Organic, we pay $1.18, and we don't do too much in conventional. Just not really our markets.
Is there a question way back? Over there? Way back.
So $20 whatever, what do you sell? What does all the seed actually cost?
So I think the question was what the pound of seed actually costs versus what you're possibly selling it for?
So you're asking what's your seed cost for planting? Yep, it's $4 a pound. That's correct. With grain production, we are between 30 and 35 pounds per acre. So you're normally 30, and just depending on where your soil's at, but mainly we're at 30 pounds. So your planting is $120 an acre.
Okay, had one right up front here.
You, through the chain of custody, do you have any problems transporting this stuff, like special permits, FMCSA? When it crosses state lines, you need special restrictions, permits, any of that?
So the questions again regarding the transfer of custody across state lines, getting seed, selling, that kind of thing. Sure.
Yeah, that's really a great question, and I'm not patronizing you at all. I would a quick little story. We did grain and seed production in North Dakota. North Dakota, for some reason, at the end of the year last year, decided we can't cross state lines with it, but we could cross a federal border. So I could go into Canada with live grain to either process it or sell it there without any type of permitting. I mean, they weren't even asking for a phytosanitary, which just blew my mind. But now there's really, if you look at 763 of the omnibus spending bill, it talks about the interstate transportation between hemp states, and there really is there's no specific regulation that you have to follow different than grain, any other type of grain. So if you're transporting a permitted crop. If, say, I was to import a cultivar from either Canada or Europe, and I had to come in under an import permit, then yes, there's special paperwork that it goes with that. But now we've been doing seed production, certified seed production in different states that it sounds like DATCAP is taking a hands-off approach as far as soon as we're licensed, we'll warehouse seed right in Wisconsin, and there will be no special permitting for that.
Right back here. Do that, Joe, a minute.
Would it be possible to combine that hemp with a 620 regular head with an auger? Or do you need a draper head?
So the question's about the combine setup.
Well, yes, it has been done. Yes, draper heads are, not all that common. But yeah, just know that anything that turns, hemp wants to wrap. But now taking it into your header, minimizing the fiber, which is very important. You're after the seed, just go after the seed. You might leave a little seed behind, but you start taking in too much of that fiber and you'll find out that that's not a lot of fun. Very sharp knives, very sharp knives. And on that header, go through your guards. You're going to want new guards, new cutting knives. That's a good heavy stock. It is the longest, strongest fiber in nature. So there is a reason they made rope out of it. Yes, and you take too much of that fiber and try and run it through your combine, you'll find out real fast.
Does a walker machine work better than a rotor?
Right now, all the newer style combines are really very, very few modifications need done. The walker machines do work very well, yes. They have in the past, and they will. I personally did not work with a walker machine. I was using a rotor. And, after we learned the hard way to minimize the fiber, things went very well.
What about that brand X59? How tall does that get?
Our
So
median
the question is on a certain variety and how tall it gets.
So X59, the median height on that is about 6.5 feet, and really the key is definitely when you're after the grain is to not take too much of the stalk. So if you're in your outlying lands and you have some plants that are at 6.5 and some at 4, don't go after the 4. Get your 6 first and come back and lower that header, because if I take 2 feet of stock, then yeah, you better have you and a bunch of your buddies have sharp knives, because you're gonna be it's gonna wrap up. Yeah, you won't be friends by the end of the day. So it's really the harvest part of it. You can make it harder, you can make it easy. And if you don't take too much of that stock, these nightmare stories that you hear are from people trying to take too much of the stock. It always comes down to that. So if you leave a little bit, your production is going to be all right. You're not going to, that just creates a huge issue. Don't take too much of the stock.
Shut your yield monitors off. Don't even look at that. Just shut your yield monitors off if that's what you're running. If you've got an area, you're running 25-foot header, you got 15 feet, 5 foot, just get that. Keep that header full at an even length. Then you got your taller stuff, then go in and get that, even if it's a 10-foot strip. But do not try to intermix the two, because that's where you're going to create some problems. And it will bunch, and the dust is very fine, and it will collect. And, of course, anything turning, anything with bearings creates heat. Have fire extinguishers, have air compressors, take your time at the end of the field, blow your machine out, keep it dust-free, but be ready.
Got a question right back here? Yes, ma'am.
So after you take the seed, can you go back with a hay bind, cut the stalk, and bale it?
Yes, you can. That is an option.
You want to repeat the question? Or do you want me to?
She wanted to go, wondering if you can go back with a hay bind, cut the stalk, and bale it. Yes. Especially on the taller side fiber where you're taking, like Ken was saying there, the 6 foot tall, you're cutting the top 2 off of it. You can go with, but just remember, anything that turns, anything that, a sickle mower and a rake might be your better bet. But, a hay bind. I personally didn't try that, but we did try sickle mower, and that worked very well.
So Brian, harvesting in that case under the pilot program, is that going to be allowed to harvest as bedding or for animal use later? Or is under this project, does that have to all be turned under, burned, destroyed? Because if we have the seed for the industry, what do we do with the rest?
Right.
If we want to bale it?
And these, I'm not sure what it's like to till that in, but yeah, that's the if it's not going off the site, right now, as I'm understanding the law related to bedding and feed, that's not an option for this product currently.
It doesn't make bedding.
Okay.
No.
Is there a market for the stock after you combine it? I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's the issue as far as the infrastructure in place to deal with the stalks is not really in place quite yet. So there is bedding markets for sure. It has to be processed, and I don't see any reason why if you know we can buy and sell the grain, why we couldn't you know make products out of the stalks too. It's just that right now the infrastructure isn't in place to deal with those stalks. So if they're saying that it can't, if it has to leave the farm, then yes, you're going to have to, you know, put it. It's going to have to be processed or sold to someone that then can, you know, package it and put it somewhere. But there are markets definitely for that. It's just the infrastructure isn't in place to process the stocks right now.
Right there in front.
So since we're talking about the legal aspects of what to do with it, like in a no-till situation, if we're just going to harvest the seed, can we just, would we be able to just leave the rest of it out there, roll it down, and just leave it, let it rot?
So the question is, under a no-till system, you harvest, you have the residue out there. Can you leave that out there, plant into that, or does that residue have to come off, or can it stay in the field?
That's a good question. I have Jennifer Heaton over here taking notes of other questions that came up tonight. But I guess I would be interested in what you guys have experienced in other states for crops once if you did just take the grain off. What is happening in those other states?
Well, what you're going to find is in what's left in that plant, by working it back, well, in a no-till situation, knocking it down, it starts going through its retting process. Retting is a rotting process that goes through. As it breaks down, you're going to return organic matter to your soil. You're going to return 50 to 60% of the inputs that you put into that plant right back will return to your soil. So very high organic matter, very good.
One more. Way back, right there, I can see a hand up.
In regards to the fibers, if you were to round bale it, does that store a lot like hay, or do you got to dry that down like the seed as well? Does it take a lot of...
So the question is if you're going to round bale it or bale that product from a moisture standpoint, getting it dry.
No, if you're going to bale it round or square bale is fine, just because for sure we talk about the infrastructure in place. The only reason that we would round bale would be as if you were going into the textile market and growing an actual fiber crop. A fiber crop is definitely going to look a lot different. Fiber crop, a true bast fiber crop, textile grade, those plants are going to be between 12 and 14 feet tall, and then you're going to want to you would round bale them because then the processor doesn't want the plant to, they want the fiber to stay long. They don't want it broken. But really when you're dealing with the fiber in the aspect of a grain or a dual purpose crop, and dual purpose really means it's a grain crop that you find something to do with the stalks. And that can, large squares are best for that because they transport the best, but you do not need to do any type of dry down or retting with those, because unless you're going into, once again, the textile market, that crop is not going to be used in the textile market. So the way they process that, you don't need to have large rounds or dry it down, ret it.
I guess to further on that, if I wanted to keep it for, I mean, right now, obviously, you gotta get rid of it, you gotta send it to a market. but say in the future, you're not gonna have to send it to a market right away. If you were to put that into a shed, would that stay for a year or 2 years? Will that fiber break down?
No, I mean, I have been in fields in Canada that farmers have stored them outside, not under cover, in the large squares for over 8 years, and I could put my hand into about the first 6 inches were dust, and then it was fine right underneath that. They stay very well, and I mean, I'm a little surprised to hear that if it doesn't leave the farm, it has to be destroyed. That doesn't really make sense to me, because once again, I mean, once you take that grain off, you're not in possession of anything that would be needed to be permitted or illegal in anyone's eyes, even the DEA, and they see things a lot different than most of us.
Good. We got a question way back. Man in the hat back there.
If you're currently just planting organic grade, how long does it take to get a professional field to get to that point where you can harvest for your company?
3 years. 3
So
years.
the question was on organic certification? Yes, the question was, if you're going to plant organically, the certification, or how long does that field need to be organic before it can be sold to your company for organic?
Yeah, so transition from conventional crop to organic is 3 years, and one of the things that be mindful of, we don't believe in monocropping anything, but hemp is a great transitional crop to come from conventional to organic because of the weed suppression ability of it. Weed is usually the biggest kind of damper in going into organic, and if you can have a good canopy for 2 years of industrial hemp, you're going to knock a lot of that weed suppression out. So 3 years is the answer.
So is there any, right now, is there a current market for non-organic?
Is there a current market for non-organic?
Yeah, so the margins in conventional, you're really, unfortunately, we're competing with the Chinas of the world, and they're really trying to flood the market in the conventional. And our organization, we're working to find kind of that all-natural aspect where because really in America, most of the crops are grown organic, not necessarily on organic ground. And what I mean by that is you're not spraying anything on them anyway. You're not using pesticides, herbicides. You're using, you plant the seed and you harvest it. But right now there is not a premium for natural production. That's something that needs to be developed. So right now, if you're not growing on conventional ground or on organic ground, you're growing conventional grain and you're going to get paid conventional prices.
Yes, sir.
Is there a minimum number of acres that we'd like to see growing under this pilot?
Is there a minimum number of acres that that the group would like to see grown under this pilot program?
We're not going to define any acreage limits or sizes. So like I say, I guess based on the volume of calls that have come in, most people are talking about starting small. I guess that's the beat out, and what I'd say is from what the calls we've taken and what people are talking about, just to try it out and see what they might do. But I don't know, from a production standpoint, that might be a different question on the economics of what's a viable, acreage.
Just to kind of follow up that, what is the availability of seed? Say, there's more, and you have to certify this approve the applications, obviously. So is seed there for those that gets accepted into the program?
Yeah, we're not, the seed's not something that, while growers will have to find the seed, and again, Ken was describing that they're a company that's going to have seed here. Other companies we've talked to have talked about the same thing of bringing seed in from other states that they're planning to distribute and find growers for here in Wisconsin. So we're not going to define what seed has to be grown or what any testing related to that ourselves. Again, our encouragement, and I think the encouragement of Act 100 was certified seed definitely provides you some benefits. And again, I'm hearing that both on the liability side for concerns, but also on the market side. So I don't know if you guys want to speak to the seed issue.
Well, yes, on the certified seed thing, remember that industrial hemp is a dioecious, meaning you have singular female plants and you have a male plant in the same field, but they're separate plants. With certified seed, with our legacy hemp X59, we're about quality and seed size, so you need to identify your market that you're after, before you plant your seed. But getting back to the monoecious or the dioecious plant, you have your female and your male plants. We're at about 30%, meaning we have 70% female plant, 30% male plant. After pollination has happened, the male plants will die. They will not produce seed. They will just stand as a dead stalk, and you can pinch that stalk like a straw from Dairy Queen, and it'll just tip over. So you start getting into non-certified seed, you're not going to be able to identify, you won't know if you have 70-30 the opposite direction. You could lose 70% of your stand. Okay. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, Bob.
Crop rotation, what is recommended in terms of crop rotation or community?
Crop rotation, again, what can be used as far as that? So what is a good crop rotation, or I guess what? And you said it followed legumes. Would that be mainly hay, or could it follow soybeans, or is there disease?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Follow soybeans, all legumes, peas, lentils, legumes, nitrogen-producing plants. Well, like Ken says, we really don't want to crop on crop, but it is possible. When you're converting organic, there's a disease. It'll develop sclerotinia, black leg, similar to a canola. Probably wouldn't want to follow a canola crop. You certainly wouldn't want to follow a cereal grain crop. Of course, hemp is non-gluten. We don't want to get that, again, repeating myself, we don't want that intermixed. And it's very hard to clean out of the seed. So, that could contaminate your end result.
Okay. Yes, sir.
How hard is it to break down that stalk? Is it worse than a corn stalk? I mean, do you need to chop it with a disc, or how do you?
So the question is, how difficult is it to get that stalk disintegrate? Get rid
There's
of it?
nothing easy about it, no. Yeah, we tried several different things. Of course, we were learning too, but we went over it with a heavy roller, laid it flat, went at a 90-degree angle, very lightly with a disc, just to kind of crack it open, and then again at another angle, getting it some dirt into it, get it to break down. We don't know what the spring result is going to be as of yet, but I have some potato rotation coming up, and it's very essential that I get this now worked into the ground. But remember, anything that turns a bearing of any sort, that tiny little fiber is going to find its way in there, and that's the hemp hangover that never goes away.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I kind of want to recap. What I thought I heard is that the only crop you're going to get out of Wisconsin is the seed, because there's no market for the fiber. I'm not sure that that is true, but that's what my ears heard. And that really there's no market for conventional seed, because that's done by China. So for 3 years, until you get to this organic place, is there money to be made?
So the question is there money to be made if these other markets aren't quite developed, or the conventional price isn't where it needs to be?
Well, there is a market for fiber. There's no infrastructure in place to get it to market. That's the issue. So, and the reason that is because grain travels well and grain travels cheap. So to be able to bring grain, let's say there's only 2,000 acres in Wisconsin of grain. No one wants to run a processing facility for 4 days and then shut it down. So to be able to bring grain to there, that's why grain travels well. So you can have a very expansive pull from different areas. When you talk about fiber, we say it cubes out before it weighs out. So it's expensive to transport it. So if you don't have enough acreage in an area, you don't have the throughput to be able to make a processing facility, have it make money for the people that are putting the money into it. And the issue we're not the only hemp company in America by any means. So I'm sure there's going to be buyers that are coming into America that are after that conventional grain. But just like any ag commodity, if somewhere someone's sitting on a whole bunch of grain, and that market is the lowest margin market, those people are always shopping for price, not necessarily quality. So that's the issue that you're having. If there's grain, conventional grain sitting in many different states and many different countries, and there's a whole bunch of it, the people that are going to buy that once again are buying on price. So that's not the game that we play. I'm not here to fight over the lowest margin, and I also don't think that we have to be an exclusive hemp company. I think that right now, seeing rooms like this, it's exciting for us, but this is the production side. Everyone here, most of the people here, I would say, are interested in producing something. And when we can start packing rooms like this with potential buyers, where people are putting, this product in food rather than on food, and we're talking with, major food companies to be buyers, that means we can contract more and more acreage from people that are interested in producing it. And right now, that's kind of the stopgap. Even if this was a 50-50 mix of people that were interested in buying hemp rather than just growing it, that's why I say a rising tide raises all ships. So we need to expand the market, not fight over the small market that's here. So I don't want to discourage anyone. I want you to be cautious and don't think that there's a buyer waiting at the end of the day. And make sure you have a buyer before you put that seed in the ground.
Where do you get the buyers?
The question is where to get the buyers, and I had a question that popped in too, and I thought maybe Patrick and Bill everybody could kind of chime in on this one too. So if we're looking for the buyers, or where do we find them? For CALS, is like the food science researchers. Do you think this is a place if we're trying to find products to put this in, or Patrick from a community development? I know Extension has that economic development component. Is that going to be something that down the road the university looks at, either from product development side of things, or maybe from a community development, trying to bring these businesses in, or companies that can use the fiber or maybe enhance a food product type thing?
So I think on the research related to market development, I think that is something that the land grant could certainly play a role in, and extension specialists could play a role in, but I'm going to stop there because I'll leave Bill some opportunity to talk about that. On the community development side of it, the way that our we have a variety of educators. There's the agriculture educators that you're probably all familiar with. You may also be familiar with the fact that we have community development educators and other types of educators in cooperative extension. And so when there is a development opportunity, an economic development opportunity of any major kind, including this potential, we have folks at the ground level that can help a community identify ways to either get things to a market or bring that market to their locale. So there is an opportunity for us to work in trying to expand that from more of a development standpoint. And then there's also the complementary research, which has to happen first, I think. So, Bill, do you want to tackle that one?
Well, I certainly think there's a lot of opportunity for research across the board, everything from agronomic practices and the genetics around the plants. One researcher came up to me the other day and said, well, why don't we just use CRISPR-Cas9 to knock out the THC genes altogether, and then you'll have a strain that doesn't even make THC at all. So everything from that sort of really exotic genomic technology. And yes, we have a world-class food science department, and so I could see folks getting interested in making products out of this. I'm mindful of our Center for Dairy Research, which is an institute on campus that's funded with checkoff dollars, and they are behind the artisan cheese revolution in Wisconsin. Not only train all the cheese makers, but develop new varieties. They're working now on fermented milk beverages. So you can see a parallel between the dairy industry and the hemp industry in terms of products for human consumption. And then our animal and dairy science departments are there. That's an obvious place to do research on the efficacy of using hemp as an animal feed supplement.
I'm going to double dip because as Bill was talking, something occurred to me because we have a parallel that's going on right now in extension. It's not at the same scale as what we're talking about right now, but we have some hazelnut research going on in northern Wisconsin that is looking. We have extension folks engaged in trying to understand market potential and do some work around understanding the potential to develop new markets. And it's a parallel, I think, to what we're talking about here. So certainly extension university can play a role in that. But it's going to take a partnership of the type of folks at this table, I think, to make that reality happen.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty impressed that they're referring to this whole thing as research when we talk about all the different ways that you have to be careful to not wrap your combine up with rope that you spun yourself that now catching on fire. So that's kind of the same thing we go through in research too, you know. I tell students in research you have to be prepared to come to work every day and fail and then come back again tomorrow, and then when it finally does work, it's the best feeling in the world. So I'll tell you all the same thing. And our research usually doesn't involve sharp knives. But
Well, I was just glad to see that the food science department wasn't working on brownies with this product. All right, had to get that one way back. Seed acquisition in order to get seed from out of state?
I'll start off with this one. Again, one of the things we're looking at, again, it will not be available in 2018, but the state, as is done in a number of other hemp-producing states, the state being an importer. So in that model, the grower buys the seed, does the financial transaction, orders the seed variety that they're looking for, and then the state acts as the importer and does basically the permitting, brings it in under the state registration. There's a specific permitting component, as I'm understanding it, that would be tied to each farmer that's that's purchasing seed. But it would be done under that state permit. Otherwise, again, Ken's identified his company, once they're licensed, would be bringing in hemp seed. Other companies from other states have described that same thing in conversation with us, that they're interested in bringing in their certified seed from other states.
harvest it. Because I think, if you're thinking about a guy contacted me, and you might be in this room, but someone contacted me and they wanted to plant like 500 acres of hemp next year to make biodiesel. Probably an ambitious plan, I just keep thinking about those flaming balls of of hemp rope shooting out of the combine.
Adam.
Which now that at first they started out, it's easy, and then they started talking about flaming balls of hemp rope and sharp knives.
Okay, Adam, got a question here?
What challenges, if any, have you found with lenders or crop insurance?
So the question is, any challenges with lenders or crop insurance?
Well, crop insurance, there is such a thing as non-insurable. Crop insurance, there is such a thing as non-insurable crops. There's a possibility depending on your insurance company or underwriter. Lenders, that's it's still in a pilot program. Bankers they're a little leery of it yet, so couldn't really say there for sure.
That's why we need everyone to push the Congressman Comer's 3530. This will take hemp from the jurisdiction of the law enforcement DEA and bring it into the USDA. So we happen to be in places that we might want to call and bug some people to sign on to that 3530.
Yes, ma'am.
How long is the application process? So if we submit an application in early March, when do we hear back?
So how long is the application process? If their applications are ready in early March, when do we hear back?
Yeah.
Good question. The room scares me a little bit, seeing this much excitement and energy, and then, like I say, we've been just getting a ton of calls, so, I mean, there could be a throughput, us just dealing with a massive applications. I guess our anticipation, like we've seen in other states, is there could be a lot of applications coming in, and maybe less hemp being planted, because again, for us, it's in Wisconsin, the way it's written is again, a one-time application fee of $150 minimum, and then it goes up incrementally from there based on acreage. So that's just, I don't know. We've got to, once we, you do the application, you get your license, then again, there's kind of a second round. That'll come back to you, and then you'll have more information to fill out, basically saying, tell us exactly what you're doing now. You've gotten licensed. What are all the other things, all the other details you have to fill in for what your plan is for growing this, so we can kind of pull it into that research.
Well, my thought is it's kind of a short time frame. You're applying in March, beginning of March, and we're wanting to plant at the end of May or the beginning of June. And seed getting crunched up, but I guess I don't know if you need a license number, if you could buy seed and have it shipped from someplace else potentially, and you have that time frame too.
Yeah, and I do think, seed acquisition could be an issue. Just getting your hands on it this season. Don't know that arena well to speak to it, but that is one of the hurdle for the time frame with which this is rolling out. Again, it sounds like there will be, seed options in the state, and things to pursue, but,
Do you need a license number? Do most companies want you to have a license number in order to purchase seed?
Yes.
So the question was, do you need that license number, approval from DADCAP in order to buy seed?
I think even talking with Ken, you guys need a state license. Most of the...
Will you get a memorandum of understanding, an MOU?
That's kind of what we're calling a grower agreement.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So, I think in what I've seen in other states where, if you were to, buy seed from Washington State, again, one of the websites I looked at for them was, first thing you got to do is provide your state license number so that they know you're part of that pilot program.
Okay, there was a question way back. So she wants to see a show of hands of anybody that's talked to a relative, grandparent that's grown it or has heard of growing it. Anybody raise their hand that's familiar with it? The gentleman there.
The main thing that I heard from your parents was it was mainly grown for fiber, not for the seed. It was mainly for the fiber for the rope. And I farmed for years over in Wabasha, Minnesota, and I was a big grower of hemp, Wabasha. That's where they shipped it out on the railroad. And that's where I think I've been to two of these hemp meetings now. It's all been on this food grade hemp, but I think we're missing the boat on it. I think there's more biofuel benefit for the average farmer than there is trying to grow the food grade hemp, because a biofuel product would be in the fiber end of things instead of the seed, and have to worry about drying and get it down at 99.9% pure for food grades. And if you're not organic, you might as well forget it because there's no money in it. That's the way I look at it.
Really? Repeat the question. Great statement. Great statement. So, all right. Any other? Got some more questions? Just before, we said we go to 8:30. We'll be here as long as you want. So, if you need to leave, I think that's fine. If you want to hang around and keep asking questions, the panel's here, and that's why we're here. So we're not going to end at 8:30. So, questions right here.
Is there any market for the oil?
Well,
is there any market for the oil?
The seed oils? Yes, absolutely. So with our operation, we're mainly into the dehulling aspect, but anything that doesn't pass the quality standard for dehulling, then we press cold press for oil. Yes.
So if you have a crushing facility, there is market for that.
Absolutely.
So if there's a crushing facility, there is a market for the oil. Because I know some have gotten into biodiesel over the past several years, and those facilities might still be out there.
Really, with the fuel aspect of industrial hemp, I think the most exciting one is the cellulosic ethanol. Cellulosic ethanol is you're not filling your gas tank with food, so it's an emerging market for sure.
Oil is used for lots of things. Fresh oil, cosmetics, gas, so does that have to be organic? Is it a big advantage to get organic oil, or does it have to be?
So does the oil have to be organic or not because of some of the uses for the oil?
Organic mainly is for the food grade, but that market sector is really kind of slowed down. It used to be it's funny because with industrial hemp in Wisconsin, definitely Wisconsin's history is in the fiber, not necessarily for the grain, and it used to be that the hot commodity industrial hemp grain was the oil. But now the dehulling market is really taken over for the food. But there definitely is an oil market, and especially with in conventional, you're going to have more industrial uses than food uses for the oil. So that's definitely an outlet. And earlier there was a question about where do you find these buyers, and that's what we've been excited about in Wisconsin. Is we've had more and more interest from larger food manufacturers in Wisconsin, because the hottest kind of commodity in food production right now, people are talking about plant protein. Plant protein is a huge growing sector, and I'm probably biased, but science backs it up that there is no better plant protein than industrial hemp for human consumption because of the bioavailability of the protein itself, and your body absorbs it easily, and the high omega-3 and omega-6 plant proteins. So
I got a quick question for Ken. Can't see him from here. What work would need to be done at the federal level to really give farmers a chance to profit from this? So is there still some work that needs to be done from a policy standpoint or from the federal level?
You know, the quick answer to what needs to be done at the federal level is pass 3530. This is not a perfect bill, but what it does is it removes the jurisdiction of industrial hemp from the DEA, which actually aren't supposed to be involved in 7606 of the Federal Farm Bill, says they're not supposed to be involved, and then Congress went ahead and took away their purse with 763 of the Omnibus Spending Bill and said they can't interfere with legal industrial hemp programs. But passing 3530, the Industrial Hemp Farming Act of America, would be the quick way to put it into the USDA jurisdiction. So I believe we're in Duffy's district here, and go ahead and give them a call and tell them to sign on, and we can make more and more of you more profitable with industrial hemp.
Is there a question right back here?
Yeah, a couple of questions actually. I know historically there was an awful lot of paper made with hemp fiber, which shouldn't need to be as long as the clothing. And the second question is, Ken, what's your minimum contract fee?
So the question was about fiber being used for paper products, those kind of things, and then also paper companies. Yep. So it could be used for paper, and then is there a minimum contract type thing?
So I think that hemp paper is definitely viable. I must say, though, that it's not a one-to-one fungible input. There is some additional infrastructure for paper mills to use industrial hemp to get it to paper pulp. It's not a huge investment. You're just dealing with a cash-strapped industry right now. So if they can convert relatively cheaply, and also with paper, we have to be very mindful of. You need mass quantities to be able to feed that mill. So is it viable? I'd say probably not right now, just because of not enough acreage to input that. But I think that you're going to see some companies transitioning, and the Wisconsin paper industry could surely use a boost right now. They shut us off. And as far as our smallest contract, if you are a quality producer and you're depending on how close you are to receiving facilities, we usually don't work in Viroqua. We're going to be doing some 20-acre plots, that type of thing, but normally we look for about 50 acres is normally, if you're looking to grow 2 to 5 acres, that's not really something that we're going to contract.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
What the lady asked me before, basically she was trying to find out is if you really think you'll have the permitting order time for someone to sign a contract and get seed 2018, or is it going to be
right? Will the permitting process get done quick enough with the March 2nd rules, getting your license, getting seed, and getting it planted this year, or is this a 2019 license? Yes.
Yeah, we'll be. The licensing process will be, I think, won't limit growing this year. You'll be able to. We'll get that out quick enough that you can order. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Ryan, I believe, was the department kind of glossed over CBD, which so will that just kind of be no talks about that until after this February 15th, 21st DEA? Will there be opportunities for people to buy and process hemp flower for CBD oil?
So the question is on the CBD rules that to be able to grow it for flowers or flower, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess on the CBD oil piece, as far as talking with our attorney about it a little bit today, we were chatting about, again, and I guess we were marking a difference between industrial hemp-based CBD oil and marijuana-based CBD oil. If it's that CBD oil that comes from industrial hemp that was at that 0.3% THC or less, that CBD oil is at 0.3% THC or less, again, talking with our attorneys today, they were saying that they believed it to be saleable and marketable in all 50 states currently. But I think as I'm understanding it, it's really the marijuana-based CBD oil that's kind of the focus of discussion. So I don't know if you guys have any better read on that than that. Is that a break point that you guys have heard as well?
In my experience in dealing with that agency, it changes day to day and state to state. I mean, it's not there's no uniform answer. The first year of North Dakota's hemp pilot program, for their seed security, the DEA made them use a locked file cabinet, where Minnesota's first year, you pretty much needed a retina scan to get into their facility. So, I mean, it really changes. I can't answer for the DEA.
And I would say that that's a consistent story. When I'm talking to 15 or 20 other hemp states, that the variation in the DEA's responses state by state it can be fairly dramatic. We've had one meeting with the DEA that was a little rough, but we've got one day after tomorrow to have additional discussions, and again, that one's sounding a little bit better. So, there's also variations on their knowledge and experience with the program, and that our original meeting was somebody that was basically had just read the Farm Bill language and was basing their responses to us off of that versus experience in working in another state. So,
there was a question right here, ma'am.
Sure. So just real briefly, maybe I'm just more green than everybody else in the room, but can you give me a brief description of your hemp growing season? Like, i.e., I grow hops, and so I get asked a lot, what's that like? What do you do all year long? And so I have a short story of this is spring, this is middle, this is end, and I've never seen hemp grow. I deal with hops that are perennial plants. I don't do the same thing every year. So you're going to sow the seeds in the spring, and then what?
So, question about the growing season, how the plant progresses.
Yeah, well, like I said, we planted, it isn't really so much the seeding date. They say 100 to 110 day growing season. Yeah, well, you get that seed into warm, moist soil, and it is going to grow fast. It has dual purpose to sunlight. Early on in its life, if you get it, say you get an early crop in early May, it's going to put on a lot of vegetation, it's going to grow a lot of stalk, it's going to put a lot of energy to that. Then after, say, around the 21st of June, you hit the summer solstice, the days get shorter. Like all plants, they react differently to that. And now it starts putting its energy into pollination and seed development. But what happens with hemp, 2nd of June, within 10 days, we were probably 6 to 8 inches tall. It looked like it kind of stopped growing, but what it was doing was setting a very, very deep vertical taproot. And it just started going down. Once that stopped, it would grow 3 to 6 inches a day. I mean, it just took off. It shaded the ground. This took off within 20 days. We're chest high. 30 days we're 6 feet high.
So you're watching it like corn? I mean, legitimately, what are you doing? Are you applying fertilizer? 2 foliar treatments, harvest.
Yeah. We would plant it, of course, obviously, checking, looking for healthy plants. That's what we're all about, is quality. So we did 2 foliar applications of Profit Pro Eggs micronutrients, and I've never seen anything react to it like that did, seriously. And then it went into its flowering stage, Very pretty plant. The male plant's very pretty when they're flowering. Female plants, then they start developing the seed. And what do? You watch it, and get ready for harvest. Start planting.
So there's no, you don't require irrigation?
Oh, no, not necessarily. I had some of mine on irrigation, but where I didn't irrigate on the heavier soils, actually had my best crop. It depends on weather and environmental conditions like anything else.
Besides,
It is a bit drought tolerant, so it sets that deep taproot, yes. Yeah.
so there's minimal, you're not into it every day all the time besides looking for some kind of pest that's happening?
Yeah, no, there's no herbicide, pesticide, fungicide, insecticide, nothing to apply. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, yeah. Highly recommend keeping, if we're looking for quality year after quality, yes. You want to keep healthy plant, start with healthy soil, healthy plant, healthy seed.
And the seed is at the top of the plant, you're going to combine just the top?
Just the top, yes, yeah.
And so then,
Although, where we run into some, we had some issues with wind, really set the plant back, held it up big time. These plants maybe got 5 feet tall. And they, after the applications of the micronutrients and different things, I thought we were complete disaster. I thought it was gone. We lost 50% of our stand. And we applied 2 different applications, the Profit Pro, it was called
Ocean Trace Minerals.
Ocean Trace Minerals, yes. They developed seed head, seed bud on a 4-foot plant over 2/3 of the way to the bottom. I mean, we were harvesting, cutting those particular plants right down close to the ground within 4 or 5 inches off the ground. Unbelievable. So it has dual purpose to sunlight. It really isn't so much about early planting, although obviously a lot of times that is, but the warm soils, warm temperatures, good growing conditions, heat units, if that seed laid in cold, wet, damp ground like anything else, it's going to take its time, but warm temperatures, 2nd of June, 60-degree soil temperatures, that stuff. At 3 days, it was up and out of the ground. It was just amazing, and it continued to grow and grow and grow.
So how many times are you in the field?
So questions, how many times in the field as far as scouting, checking things out? That kind of, as far as applications? Gotcha.
Yeah.
Back off that lady's question, you mentioned foliar feeding and needs nitrogen and sulfur.
Oh, well, all of that, your trace elements all came in the foliar feeding. We did 2 applications. Seeded the 2nd June. We did an application shortly after the 4th of July, and then about almost 3 weeks later again. Oh, we used yeah, we just used our sprayer. We happened to have a Case IH 3330 sprayer, and we put down 20 gallons. It was 10 gallons of the foliar, 10 gallons of water. Good application. 2nd of June, they were probably about 3.5 feet, or 18th of June, about 3.5 feet, shortly after the 4th of July, excuse me. We were getting up about this high. Over my head there, definitely 6 feet tall going into that second application.
How many years have you been planting it, or how many years have you harvested?
Last year was my first year, yes.
So the question was, how many years have they harvested? Last year was the first year?
Last year was the first year, yes. My first year, North Dakota's pilot program, yes.
Question right back here.
Is there any land ownership requirements to acquire the permit, or can you grow on
Can you grow on rented land, or do you have to be a landowner?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can grow on rented land. I think we will likely ask at least for the landowner's information. Looking at other states, I know some of them require a sign-off by landowners. We haven't finalized what we're going to do there, but at a minimum would require, at somewhere on the probably the grower agreement, the landowner's name and contact information.
So a couple more questions right here.
If you didn't plant till June 2nd, what did you do? Just till to keep it organic certified?
Yeah, I was not organic, and yes, we did. We tilled to keep weed suppression down. The reason we had to wait till the 2nd of June is because of the import whole debacle at the Canadian border.
Another question right here?
Characteristic of the seed, is it a real hard seed as far as, it sounds like you leave a fair amount of seed when you combine it. It said in the spring, next crop, you can.
Yeah, if you can show me how to save every kernel of seed on any crop, I'll be welcome. Yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah. You'll get a...
For a long time, like a rapeseed seed, where the following year, you're still going to get volunteer stuff coming, or?
Well, no, I don't believe so, no. No, like a soybean seed, you can crush it in your fingers. I mean, you can crush that seed, and when it becomes moist, I couldn't tell you that, but it could.
Okay, question right here.
Currently, where are the markets located and when do you deliver?
Where are the markets located and when would you deliver?
So right now in Wisconsin, there is no processing. We're in the process of setting that up. We have 4 different locations that we're looking at, and we know basically all 4 of those will be receiving centers. And that's going to be, one will be in the Viroqua area, the other will be Pierce County, and we're looking at some land over here in the next week between Menominee and Eau Claire, and then down by Rock County are the 4 receiving centers that we will have. But as far as other people, I can't speak for them. I don't know.
Where's the closest one to us now, the receiving center?
Well, that would be in Minnesota.
So the question was, where's the closest receiving center? And
well, there is no receiving center as far as where you can just buy it. It's going to be people that contract you is where you're going to get it. So right now, like with our company, we use third-party processors. So that's why we're stepping into the processing ourselves, so that we don't pay other people toll processing. So right now, if you didn't have a buyer, you're not delivering to anywhere, because either a buyer is going to find you or you're going to find the buyer and you're going to take it wherever they need it. So there's no place right now that I could say you just show up in a truck and unload.
Okay. Back there, question?
I have a question there on if you're coming into a land that was a hay fuel or something like that and it's organic, what do you use for your weed control? Because you're coming in there, I mean, you can till it, but that grass or quack is going to come back like gangbusters, and then you can't put nothing on it. And then you're going to turn around the next year again, you want to keep it organic, you don't want to spray the Roundup or 2,4-D or anything on it. What do you use? Just strictly cultivate, or you go into burning methods, or what are you doing?
So the question's kind of coming into an organic system with a hay field, how do you control that flush of weeds or get that under control early on?
Especially in the first year, I can see if you have an organic soybean field where something might be a little cleaner, but you still get a lot of your tall pigweed and stuff. Granted, you're harvesting probably over the top of them weeds, but what you don't harvest is all going back into seeds. You're constantly seeding down weeds.
With good soil temperatures and adequate moisture, if you had it mowed back, shortened, whatever, this crop is going to take off fast, and it shades the ground out, canopies very quickly. It's ideal for converting to organic. It just
dry that seed in a conventional grain dryer?
You do not want to, there you go, lots of air. Just get it in there and just a lot of air into it, yes, yep.
So you can use a conventional grain dryer without the heat, will work, is what you're saying?
Sure,
okay.
yeah, just get a lot of air to it, right, yep.
Okay, way back. How do you know when it's ready, maturity? Yep, ready to harvest.
Well, you're going to have 22 to 12 moisture on the same plant.
And if you don't have a moisture meter, it's really a trained eye. So what you're going to look for is the seed's going to be getting darker and kind of tiger striped, and then what you're looking for is kind of a uniformity on the seed head, because if you allow the whole thing to get to that tiger striped, normally your moisture is going to be too low, and you're going to start having some wrapping issue. So it's really you're looking for about 3/4 of that seed head to look as if it is that tiger striped, and starting to actually break open from the pod itself. With some cultivars, like one of our grain cultivars, the X59, it has great shatter resistance. That's good and bad depending on some of the cultivars that don't have as good a shatter resistance. You're going to look at that seed head, and it's pretty easy to look and say, well, I need to get that off the field. And where with the X59, the great shatter resistance is good, because if you're coming through with that header, you're not just a lot of the, if you don't have the good shatter resistance, when you're coming through, you're going to be knocking a lot of that seed on the ground before it even gets into the combine. So really it comes down to a trained eye, and like with us, if we're working with you, we like to put boots on the ground in the fields because we have a vested interest in you being successful. So we like to come out and kind of help you with your before harvest time, your post-harvest plan, and to get a plan together of when to harvest. But really, at this point, I'm just going to say it's a trained eye, and really looking for that tiger stripe.
How do you measure the moisture?
Exactly.
Moisture meter?
Moisture tester.
Moisture tester?
Yeah, there's calibration numbers that, it's available online.
I have another question here is I can grow 110-day corn for corn size, but I can't grow for ripe. 90 I can handle no problem. How will that set? Because you said you want 100 to 110 days. You didn't tell me what's your magic number for growing degree days? Growing degree numbers.
The question is growing degree days, kind of the length of maturity.
It's just more to the dual purpose to this, after the days shorten, it really sets its mind to seed development. Until then, it's putting all of its energy. I wish we could develop some sort at this point where there's really not looking at the fiber right now. I wish we could breed something to knock it back a little bit, slow it down so it's not putting all of its energy into the stalk, into the leaves, although it's ideal to keep a healthy plant. But after the 21st, going in through July, when it started setting flowers and buds and things like that, we harvested mid-September, towards the end of September there. It just really put its energy in. I don't know if that is vitally important. Growing degree days and growing degree units obviously have an effect on it, but not as much as, the vitality in the seed and getting it up out of the ground and getting it growing.
Let me add to that. I've got a paper here from Canada, and it's talking about growing degree days. Flower initiation is around 782 growing degree days. Pollination around 971, and then mature around 1258. So that kind of gives you an idea.
Yes, and hemp is a very photosensitive crop. When we were doing test crops in Hawaii that I spoke of, one of my mentors, Dr. David West, and one of the things that we found is when you try to grow in a region where it isn't grown as far as the latitude, we had plants that were coming out of the ground and wanting to go to flower when they're about 9 inches tall. So, it's really the development of the different cultivars have come a long way where we're able to now kind of pinpoint the industries that they're going into in the growing regions of where they're going to. So there's quite a bit of availability of different cultivars for different growing regions, but hemp is a very photosensitive crop. So,
another question back there. How many acres could you combine in a day, and how big of a head did the combine have?
Yeah, we had a 35-foot flex draper, and we started slow. We'd bring in 12 to 15,000 pounds at a time with our seed tender, just regular Unverferth seed tender. Just kind of getting the gist of how things work, what we were dealing with, run it through our density cleaner, getting foreign material out of it. Once we really got the hang of what was going on. Seeding a lot in a day, there's some things you need to be aware of. First of all, you need to be up, your combine operator needs to be up on the machine. You know, you need to keep it clean. You need to constantly be checking for wrapping, hanging, dragging. Another thing you're going to want to look for in your harvesting machine, maybe a good carbon filter for the cab, because exposure to that dust, I was on the ground handling the seed coming in day after day after day after day, and yeah, I don't know what it was, but it was something, you know, dust. It'll affect you a bit. My answer was, what was the question? I don't know. You know, we did 5, we did 40 up, you know, up to, didn't push it too hard. We just really didn't push it. It was more about quality, you know, keeping it under control.
And then once you got a combine, where did you put it? What's your drying system? Did you literally empty it into a corn bin and blow air on it, or what's
Yeah, pretty much like that. We after we run it through our density separator and got foreign material out of it, we went to hopper bottom bins that had airflow through it. After possibly 3 days in that bin, we would empty that bin completely, load the semis, and then reload the bin again. Air has a tendency of taking the point of least resistance, of course, and it would hang up along the walls, all about quality. We would empty the bin, reload it, just kept the air flowing steady all the time. People confuse these bins, these airflow bins, as drying bins. They're curing bins, really. So what happens when you got your bin full, you start building curing zones, and it pushes the moisture up and out. They're not really there for drying, although they do. But there's a difference between green moisture and, say, rain moisture. Yeah.
correct? So you're blowing air across it?
No, we're blowing it up and through, from the bottom out the top. And it's, you just, it starts pushing.
How long does it take you to get to where you want to be?
Well, right away we knocked about 4 points out of it just by separating foreign material out of it. So say we came from 18 to 14, then we had it in there a couple of days. We'd rotate it. We're getting it down to 12. I would say that air was on it. We rotated those bins from empty to full twice, each one. I'm sure the air was on it for 50 days.
And you're testing moisture or you're feeling moisture?
Testing moisture, and actually I had moisture, humidity, and barometric pressure, different
Same thing with the hops. I get it. I just do it in the reverse. I don't push air up. I pull air down backwards. But days, sometimes hours, depending on moisture in the air, because obviously if the air is wet, I'm not going to dry the hops any.
Well, yeah, there's
unless you put heat on it, and we're not meant to, and neither are you in this situation, is what I'm gathering.
right. Yeah, we don't exceed 150 degree temperatures that take the Viadel.
So my last question here is...
You might want to check on how you're moving that air through your bin, but anyway.
Suck it straight down.
Okay.
Suck it through it.
All right.
So then, here's my last one. Are you looking to form a co-op here? Is that your goal, or are you trying to be a receiving end? Because I have written market down on my paper with a question mark 3 times, and I don't know if there's a definitive answer here. Your answer is you need to know your market, and I get that. There's loads of market. There's lots of opportunity in hemp. I understand that. But when I'm done with my process as a grower, do I take it to one of your 4 receiving plants and you cut me a check? Or am I part of a group as a whole? Follow?
Should I repeat that question? So are we looking to form a co-op, or what do you do with it? Do I write you a check if you deliver it to me? We contract up front. So if we don't contract you, we're not a buyer. We're a buyer for our contracted acreage. So we're not a receiving center for anyone else as of right now but our own needs. So that's
Moving forward, in the future.
in the
Are you
future.
looking to add growers to Legacy Hemp, or are you looking to
Yeah, we're doing
buy
that.
acres and employ people?
No, we contract acreage. So we contract farmers to grow for us. So that's. I mean, I guess, am I misunderstanding the question?
No,
Specifically,
so it's like a co-op, or it's not? It's different.
No.
No.
You'll have a contract.
Contract production.
We're about quality, and quality comes from the X59, the larger seed, the ideal for the de-hulling market. We're not looking to buy any other seed from any other company through any other producer. We will buy X59 for our growers.
So we had a question right here. Let's get this gentleman.
Would I be correct in assuming that under this research plot this year, that nobody's really going to be making any money once the crop is harvested at the end of the year?
No, that's not true.
That's not true?
No.
So the question was, since we're under a pilot, should we expect that no one's going to make money in it? No. If we contract you, then you'll make money, and if you don't, then you probably wouldn't grow for us again. So, this is something that we are researching marketing, and DATCAP is, as far as we know, like other states, they're allowing you to be involved with the research of marketing. You're going to give your agronomic study in, you're going to give that to the state, and then when we purchase it from you, we're researching marketing.
But in order to get a contract with you, you'd like to see 20 acres or more.
Well, I mean, that's in a perfect world, but we're really looking to work with people that can produce the quality that we're after. And if that means that we, in an area, we do, 10 people with 10 acres each rather than 2 people with 50, then that's what it is. But I mean, if you can show, and that's why, we have the grower information form as far as of people that were interested in growing for us. That's the initial step is, you tell us what you believe of your operation, and then we come and check it out. And if you're going to be a grower for us, then we contract you and move forward.
I was going to just add, just to make sure I was not misunderstanding him, but just on the concept of referencing if it's going to be a pilot program this year, you said. And for right now, this is a pilot program. That's all there is, and that's what we know of for the foreseeable future. At some point, it may change from a pilot, but this isn't a pilot program for this year. That next year will unleash the regulatory program, won't be there anymore. It's a pilot. That's what we've got to work with currently. We all hope that it grows into something beyond that pilot. And some of Ken's referenced some of the changes with 3530 and other things that may help that come about. But pilot program is what states have been given to work with at this point.
Yes, sir.
The license will allow us to grow it. Will it allow us to process our own product?
Can you process your own product with the license to grow it?
Yeah, or is that a whole nother?
Yeah, I think I believe we will be licensing processors, or at least we'll have some kind of an agreement with processors. We're looking at 2 different things right now, so that would probably be, if we go down that path, it would probably be a separate. What's that?
This year?
Yeah, because there's going to be folks like Ken and others that are going to be processing material.
All right, I think we're going to kind of wrap it up here. The panel's going to hang around for a little bit. I'm sure we're going to have some additional questions. We've been sitting for 2.5, almost 3 hours, so I think time to move up. So as far as wrapping up, I'd sure like to thank Farm Bureau Federation for providing today's forum. So let's give them a hand for sponsoring today. So,
I'd like to say
Jim
something
and
quick
Rob
about
are still
that.
here?
I'd like to say something quick about that. As someone that's interested in hemp and coming into Wisconsin, I can say unequivocally that there is no way what happened in Wisconsin as far as passing unanimously in this state, this would not have happened without the Farm Bureau. And that is 100% true. And the two gentlemen sitting over there, both Jim and Rob Richard, they were instrumental in getting this passed. So I think we all need to thank them for their efforts in Wisconsin here.
So let's thank the panel for hanging out here tonight. Lots of great information. And I think those that need that information, I think that the Department of Ag email, get on this listserv, so when that licensing comes out, that process, you have the contact information of all the panelists. And if you need other info, contact your local extension agent. We'll try to help you out. Thanks again.